Today, I'm going to tell you exactly how to set up the perfect day of eating. The reason I want to share this with you is because I get questions all the time of how should I prep my meals? How should I set up my meals? How many meals a day should I eat? What should my nutrient timing look like? Do I need to worry about any of this? Is it just daily calories? I get all these questions, and at the end of the day, the science is in the compliance. And what I mean by that is the way we're going to get you the best results possible is setting up something that you can comply to. That being said, there are some things that we should be looking at to set up the perfect day of eating, to optimize your workout, optimize the timing for digestion, optimize the easeability to actually hit your daily macros so you don't leave things left on the table. So there are a lot of things that I've noticed working with clients for over 8 years now of what works best for them. And today I'm going to share that with you. Before we start looking at how to set up your meals, just know that the number of meals matters far less than the daily intake you're bringing in, right? Your daily calories, your daily macros, staying consistent with those trumps everything. But once we set your calories, once we set your macros, and we start looking at how many meals you should be consuming, this is where we can kind of dial things in to help you comply. And I truly believe, like I said before, the science is in the compliance. Yes, calories matter most, but taking these calories and forming your individual macros and your individual meal plan is how we're going to get you to comply and adhere to that caloric intake on a more consistent basis. So what we want to do here is, number one, we typically want to stay between 3 to 5 meals a day. And the reason I recommend this is for a few different reasons. Number one, experience. I've just noticed over time that it's a lot easier for people to hit their calories, whether they struggle to hit enough calories or they constantly overeat. It's easier to fit your calories in about that 3 to 5 range. Number two, digestion. It's just going to be a little bit easier if you spread it out a little bit. You don't need to go as far as eating 6 or 7 meals a day where you're eating like rabbit food, but at the same time, if you're only eating once or twice a day, you're eating really large meals, and that can wreak havoc on your gut, especially if you've ever had issues with digestion. Number three, as you'll notice, protein is perfectly spaced out when I go through these meals. You'll see that. The reason for that is because we want to optimize muscle protein synthesis, which is the anabolic response we get from eating protein. Because of that, we want to spread it out 3 to 5 times a day because that's going to give us the optimal kind of drip effect of protein leaking into our day. So there's a few reasons why I spread it out this way. And last but not least, I would just say from my personal experience, energy seems to be best in individuals when we're consuming 3 to 5 meals per day. All right, so meal one, 25 to 40 grams of protein, 0 to 10 grams of carbs, 10 to 25 grams of fat, and this is after a 12 to 14 hour fast. Now, if you wake up at 5 a.m. for work and you have to eat right before because you're not going to get a chance to eat till 1 p.m., then you can scratch the fast. This is a perfect meal plan for a perfect world scenario in an ideal setting. That's why you're training in the evening, like I said, and that's why you're doing a 12 to 14 hour fast, meaning if your last meal was at 8 p.m., you wouldn't eat your first meal the next day until 8 a.m. What this does is, number one, it's going to improve insulin sensitivity a little bit. It's going to improve your digestibility, and I believe it's going to improve your nutrient absorption or your nutrient partitioning, basically how your body utilizes the calories you're giving it. Realistically, it's just because you're giving your gut a break overnight. I think this is really useful for a lot of people chasing health or body composition. You don't need to fast 16, 18, 20, 24 hours all the time. But if you can get a mini fast in, even just 10 hours, it's going to be helpful for your digestion. That's going to lead to better body composition results because you're going to use these nutrients we're giving you. Now, the first macronutrient we're going with is protein. 25 to 40 grams is a decent range, and the reason for that is because 25 grams is about the minimum, 20 is about the minimum, but 25 is going to be the best muscle protein synthesis response, and 40 grams is the threshold of that. So as we get heavier, as we have more muscle mass on our body, we need more protein naturally. And 40 grams is going to be that upper range per meal. Now, that doesn't mean you can't absorb or digest more than 40 grams per meal. It just means from a muscle protein synthetic response, so the actual anabolic response you get from eating protein, it's going to cap out about 40 grams. If I eat 70 grams, it's going to take longer to digest. I'm not going to need to eat for much longer. So this number can get larger. Either A, the bigger you get, or B, the more meals you have. But for a 4 to 5 meal range, which I'm going to get to this whole are there macros left 5th meal soon, for this 1 to 4 range meal, you're going to want to go 25 to 40 grams depending on your body weight. And we're going to keep that consistently every single meal because we want protein evenly spread every 3 to 5 hours. So you'll notice each meal says 3 to 5 hours later. That's going to be the range of time you need between protein doses to, again, stimulate that anabolic response, that muscle protein synthesis response properly and efficiently. If you're going further than that or less than that, you're not doing the best you can with the protein you're consuming. Second, we have carbohydrates. I have 0 to 10 grams of carbs here, and I have 10 to 25 grams of fat, which means we're going less carbs. So this is trace carbs. 0 to 10 grams are trace carbs. Trace carbs would be the few grams of carbs you have from putting salsa on your eggs or from Brussels sprouts and peppers being inside of your omelet. They're very low, mainly fiber, and they're just trace. They're barely anything. So you can have those things and you can still stay under 15 grams of carbs for sure. That's still considered a low carb meal. We're going to crank up the fat in this meal because we're not training for a while, so we don't need carbohydrates. We don't want to have a high insulin spike first thing in the morning and our blood sugar crash and us lose energy or have cravings later on. And the best way to do that is to have a protein fat dominant meal. This is going to keep us clear and thinking and not craving. So during the morning, you're going to be more productive at work. You're going to be more clear and awake during the day. And you're not going to have a midday crash where you're craving more carbohydrates. So this is a great way to set up your meal. And again, 25 to 40, 10 to 25, their range is depending on your personal body weight and your personal metabolic rate. So how much food can you consume? A 110-pound female might be at a 25 gram and a 12 gram of fat range, whereas a 200-pound male might be at 40 and 25. It really depends, but the purpose we need to get here is you have a little bit of time to digest and to heal your gut overnight, and then we have a protein and a fat dominant meal. Meal number 2. 3 to 5 hours later. Again, this is going to give us ample time to digest and to get ready for that muscle protein synthesis response. Because remember, every 3 to 5 hours, we want to kind of give that drip of that muscle protein synthesis response. So we want to consume protein every 3 to 5 hours. Less than 3 hours, we're still digesting, absorbing, and processing the amino acids from that first meal. So we don't need to push it past 3 hours. Plus, from a digestive standpoint, probably not going to be the best solution. So we want to space those out every 3 to 5 hours. This meal is going to look exactly the same as meal 1 because it's still relatively early. 11 a.m., 10 a.m. for some people, 1 p.m. at the latest. Either way, we're not training for a while. The only time this differs is if a person has a higher caloric intake, a higher carbohydrate intake, and they physically cannot push carbs back further. A good example is me. I have a higher carb approach in my diet, so this meal 2 for me is much lower carb than my training meals, but I still have starchy carbs in there or fruit because I need to put them somewhere. And I'm going to get to why we don't want to just cram them all into 1 to 2 meals later on. But this meal is going to be the same protein, about the same fat, and then if you have carbs to spare, we're going to put 0 to 40 grams. So that's either trace carbs or 40 grams or less of something low glycemic. And this is going to be either rice with some kind of fat, which we have there to slow the digestion down, or oats, or a sweet potato, things that are going to slowly digest. Produce is a good example, has fiber in it. Fruit is a good example, has fiber in it. These things are going to slow the digestion down, slow the insulin response, and it's going to be a better meal to keep you sustained and not, again, craving 1 to 2 hours later because you had a very hard insulin and blood sugar drop. Number 3, we have our pre-training meal. Now, for some people, because of their schedule, they might completely take out meal 2 and they just have meal 1, 3, and 4. For other people, like I said, we're going to spread them out a little bit more throughout the day. This meal, again, has the same protein, but now we're going to go a little bit higher carb and a little bit lower fat. When we have a carbohydrate dominant meal, especially pre-training, we don't want a lot of fat in there. When we have too much fat in a meal, it's going to slow that digestion down. Now, sometimes that's smart. But times like this, right before a workout, number 1, we want that insulin spike to come because that's going to benefit us from a muscular standpoint during our training. And number 2, we don't want our carbohydrates to be digesting so slowly that we feel it in our gut when we're training. There's nothing worse than being under the barbell and feeling your body digesting and your stomach churning while you're trying to train. We want our body to be focused on our limbs and our muscular system to perform, not digestion. So in this meal, we really want it to be mainly protein and carbs, and then a little bit of fat, which is going to be kind of like trace fat. If your carbohydrate or your protein source has a little bit of fat in it, that's the fat you're getting in this meal. Or if you got to cook it in coconut oil, maybe you do a teaspoon, so it's like 5 to 7 grams of fat, but not that much. So we're going to keep it pretty low. The range for the carbohydrates in this meal is pretty big, 35 to 60 grams. Again, this is what you can personally tolerate. Some people can't go past 40 to 50 grams without feeling lethargic. Other people need 50 to 60 grams to feel like they put something in their body as fuel. So this is going to be very individualized. Number 4, we have the post-training meal. This is going to come 1 to 3 hours after training. The only caveat for this meal is if you are somebody who has chronically high levels of cortisol, whether that's a clinical issue, a hormonal issue, a stress-related issue, or you're a high-level athlete who is constantly in that sympathetic mode where you're just fight or flight 24/7 because you're a CrossFit athlete or you're an MMA fighter or something like that. For you, we might want to replenish and rehydrate right away. So we might wait on this meal and we'll pop in a post-workout shake of something like highly branched cyclic dextrin, which is a powdered carbohydrate that's going to absorb like that. And in the gastric system, it's a lot easier. It can bypass things and rapidly digest in our body. We can even add some caffeine and some sodium in that meal, some salt, and we're going to rapidly digest those carbohydrates even faster. But the reason this is important is not necessarily because you need to replenish muscle glycogen right away, which is why I say 1 to 3 hours. That's kind of been debunked. But it's because our cortisol response after training is very high. That's a stress-related response. If we want to recover properly and get back to our normal way of living, we need to bring ourselves down from a nervous system standpoint into parasympathetic mode. In order to do that, we need to spike insulin, get some carbohydrates in our body, and that's going to blunt that cortisol response. So for these individuals, we might insert an immediate carbohydrate shake after their workout. For everybody else that doesn't really need to worry about this, or doesn't have enough calories and macros to add these things in because it is grams of carbs that goes towards your daily macros. For these people, we're just going to focus on getting a solid whole food meal in 1 to 3 hours post-training. This is going to look like the same exact protein as we've been doing, 25 to 40 grams depending on your body weight, 40 to 100 grams of carbs. That's a big range. And again, this depends on your personal digestibility, and it also depends on where your daily macros are at. So if you have plenty of room to play with, again, this is me. I don't ever eat more than 4 meals a day, and I enjoy having a large meal for my last meal. So for me, I'm leaning towards that 80 to 100 grams in this meal because I can spare the carbs, and I enjoy sitting down and eating a big meal before bed. It's also going to have a little bit lower fat. You can do a little bit more fat than you could in the pre-workout meal because you're not worried about sitting around watching Netflix and your body digesting. You're not training. It's not that big of a deal. But you don't want to have so much fat that your body has trouble digesting the rest of this. So we are going to keep it a little bit lower just to make the carbohydrates absorb faster. And again, this is going to come down to your personal digestibility. The last meal of the day, are there macros left? Meal 5 is for people who A, get nighttime cravings, or B, still have macros to play with. So if you're somebody who knows that you end up craving things, even if you've already hit your macros, what I would do is purposely take away 10 to 20 grams of carbs out of each meal. Take away a little bit of protein out of each meal. Take 2 to 5 grams out of each meal. Give yourself enough room to have a light to moderate sized meal at the end of the night to fix those cravings. Now, my recommendation is not going to be to binge on junk food, but this would be a time where you have like some protein ice cream or you have some fruit with some stevia on it and maybe a side of Greek yogurt so it's sweet and you get that craving away, that sugar craving. It might just be having a diet soda at night or chocolate, whatever your thing is. But this meal is for anybody who gets nighttime cravings that needs to separate macros to make sure that they fix that. And that's the whole point of flexible dieting. It's not to try to neglect or restrict yourself from that. It's to fit it in so you can still stay within your daily caloric intake, but still enjoy having that thing that you want to have. The other people this is for anybody who has too many macros to fit into 4 meals. There's a lot of people I work with that are either high-level CrossFit athletes or they're on a mission to gain as much muscle as possible, and we need to eat more food. These individuals can struggle to fit that into 3 to 4 meals. And if you're struggling to hit your calories, it's probably smarter to open up the amount of meals you have and spread them out a little bit further throughout the day so you can actually hit your daily targets. Because like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the most important aspect of all of this is hitting your daily macros every single day. All right, that's all I got for you. If you like this type of content, give it a like, drop us a comment below, and make sure you go check out the website, boomboomperformance.com. We have podcasts, videos, blogs, ebooks, coaching, and so much more free content for you to take in so you can get better results.